Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Psych Tech at Work podcast. I am your host, Dr. Charles Handler, and boy howdy do we have a special guest for you all today. You are going to love this. Our guest, my guest, your guest, is none other than the Commissioner of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That is right, Commissioner Keith Sonderling. And during our discussion today, we're going to cover all kinds of hot topics, all kinds of things that relate to the ins and outs of how people are going to hire today and in the future, right? In the age of AI, are things more complicated? Absolutely. Are the core ideas of what it takes to hire ethically and responsibly any different? I don't know. You be the judge. In my opinion, and maybe in Commissioner Sonderling's opinion too, it all boils down to some really simple principles, which we'll talk about today. At the same time, you're going to hear straight from the horse's mouth what we can expect from the federal government in terms of new laws, rules, regulations, policies, all that good stuff. We'll also talk about the impact of things like the EUAI Act at the global level, and even things like the New York City law at the local level. That's right. What we're going through now is a groundswell of thought, consideration, and careful deliberation about what it's going to take to make sure that hiring is ethical, responsible, and happy for everybody involved, right? It's a tall order. So let's talk about, kind of wind it out here. There has been definitely a lot of good stuff coming out of the federal government around, like the No Robot Bosses Act that's kind of working. So there's a bunch of these things, right? And I guess then you have all these different state laws, even some city laws, right? So do you feel like, and we talked about the uniform guidelines still being the canon, still being very, very important and useful. Do you feel like what's coming is potentially a federal law that knots together all the different things in the No Robot Bosses Act? There's probably, I know there are other things. So there's disparate federal things that are saying a lot of the same stuff and even coloring it in with more information, say on the AI side. Is that going to be all tied up nicely for us in some kind of thing? Or is it just, hey, the uniform guidelines are still relevant to all this. We don't need anything new. So what are your thoughts on that?
This is just my personal opinion, of course. Don't bind the EEOC or the federal government. I don't think any of that's going to happen.
Right.
I think it's going to be this patchwork of state and local laws, still essentially relying on the EEOC in a way, sort of to saying like, here's the basics. I think as we've discussed at length, there's going to be add-on requirements, but I don't think you're going to have that consensus from the federal government. I don't know if there's, maybe my prediction is because generative AI, people really understand the issues a lot more with copywriting, with, likely the actors and actresses, images and musicians. Yeah. Maybe they do something there because it's understandable on the copyright protection. Yeah. But I just can't imagine anything just like privacy laws. GDPR in California has one. And, states are just starting to do it themselves. So, I just don't think there's going to be any action universally. But look, you are getting, by these bills, you're getting a peek into what potentially powerful senators or legislators are going to expect from employers using AI. Like you brought up the No Robot Bosses Act. And look, if they're saying they don't want employees being subject to an algorithm for their performance reviews or their management, that's a pretty good sign that, of at least what their personal tastes are. And in a way, you should take that as a warning if very powerful senators are saying that this is what their concerns are. And you can judge your own practices around that.
Yeah. And it's like environmental stewardship has been a big one, thank goodness, in the last, probably decade or so. And companies have their own, their federal stuff, but companies have done a really good job of having their own internal governance, their own moral compass, if you will, on this stuff. And I think that all the stuff we've talked about today, I just continue to think that companies can be so proactive, and so do so many meaningful things under their own power because they know what the issues are, and they have the ability to make their own standards to supplement, and help make sure they're compliant with the federal, global, planetary, whatever it is stuff. So as we got the last just couple of minutes here, I've started to do this with a lot of my guests. I'd like you to fast forward 10 years to 2034.
Jeez.
Describe what you think in your mind the hiring, process looks like, and how are these things governed, if in any different way than now?
I think that, I don't think the civil rights laws are going to be amended because they haven't been really in a very long time. I don't know if there's going to be a new standard relating to employment assessment testing because there hasn't been in a long time.
Right.
What I do think is you're going to see just a general awareness, whether it's through litigation or government enforcement, of actually having cases decided in court, and maybe even the court setting some of the guardrails or parameters of what these laws mean related to AI, which we haven't really seen yet, of course. But I think just more of a general adoption across the board. And at some point, employers spending money on that infrastructure to use it properly. Because, I always say it's no longer a question about, are you going to use, AI in HR? It's how are you going to use it at this point, for what purpose, and how are you going to comply with current law or any future law? So I think that's where it's all going. And I think at some point there's going to be just a general awareness or understanding of the baseline obligations of what you need to do.
Can you form a vision in your head of what an assessment or a hiring tool is going to look like 10 years from now?
Oh, geez,
no right or wrong answer.
I can't even imagine.